Ahmad Hassan checked his watch as he hurried through O'Hare International Airport. He had arrived with plenty of time to spare, but the security line had been unexpectedly long. Still, he wasn't worried. His flight to New York wasn't boarding for another 20 minutes. Ahmad adjusted his navy suit and straightened his red tie as he walked. At 38, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had worked hard for everything he had achieved. The son of Pakistani immigrants, Ahmad had put himself through law school and now served as a senior corporate attorney at one of Chicago's most prestigious firms. Today's trip was particularly important. Ahmad was flying to New York to represent a major airline in a class-action lawsuit. The irony wasn't lost on him. He frequently flew with competing airlines while defending this one in court. But business was business, and Ahmad was known for his exceptional legal skills regardless of the client. Final boarding call for Flight 372 to LaGuardia. The announcement echoed through the terminal. Ahmad quickened his pace, rolling his carry-on behind him. When he reached the gate, the airline employee smiled professionally. "Just in time, sir." "Thank you," Ahmad replied, handing over his boarding pass and ID. The gate agent scanned his ticket. "First class, seat 2A. Enjoy your flight, Mr. Hassan." Ahmad nodded gratefully and made his way down the jet bridge. As he stepped onto the plane, he felt the familiar shift in atmosphere. The slightly cooler air, the hum of the ventilation system, the low murmur of passengers settling in. A flight attendant with a tight blonde bun and a name tag reading Diane stood at the entrance. Her smile faltered slightly as she glanced at Ahmad, then quickly recovered. "Welcome aboard," she said, her tone noticeably cooler than it had been for the passenger ahead of him. "First class is to your right." Ahmad had experienced these subtle shifts in treatment before. After nearly 4 decades of life in America, most of it post 9/11, he had developed a thick skin. He simply smiled and moved toward his seat. First class was half empty, with only 8 of the 16 seats occupied. Ahmad found 2A, stored his carry-on in the overhead bin, and settled into the comfortable window seat. He pulled out his phone to send a quick text to his paralegal, letting her know he had made the flight and would be ready for their meeting later that afternoon. A middle-aged couple took their seats across the aisle, giving Ahmad polite nods which he returned. The woman whispered something to her husband, who shrugged in response. Ahmad pretended not to notice. As the remaining passengers boarded, Ahmad reviewed his notes for the upcoming case. The airline he was defending had strong arguments, but the plaintiffs had gathered compelling testimonies. It would be a challenging case, exactly the kind Ahmad thrived on. The flow of boarding passengers slowed to a trickle. Ahmad looked up from his notes, surprised to see someone standing next to his row. A man in his early 30s wearing an expensive suit that seemed a size too small for his broad shoulders. "Excuse me," the man said, checking his boarding pass. "I think you're in my seat." Ahmad raised an eyebrow and double-checked his own boarding pass. "2A? That's what I have as well." The man frowned and showed Ahmad his ticket. Sure enough, it also read 2A. "There seems to be a mix-up," Ahmad said calmly. "Let me call the flight attendant." He pressed the call button, and within moments Diane approached. "Is there a problem, gentlemen?" "We seem to have been assigned the same seat," Ahmad explained, showing her both boarding passes. Diane examined them with a frown. "This is unusual. Let me check the system." She pulled out a tablet and began tapping on the screen. "Mr. Peterson, you were originally in 3C but received an upgrade. Mr. Hassan, you purchased a first-class ticket directly. So who gets the seat?" Mr. Peterson asked. Diane hesitated, her eyes darting between the two men. "Well, typically the passenger who purchased the first-class ticket directly would have priority over an upgrade." Mr. Peterson's face fell with disappointment. "It's not a problem," Ahmad offered. "I'd be happy to take another first-class seat if one's available. I just need a window for this flight if possible." Diane checked her tablet again. 2C is open across the aisle." Ahmad nodded. "That works perfectly." As he gathered his things to move, Ahmad noticed Diane speaking in hushed tones to another flight attendant, who glanced in his direction with an unreadable expression. Ahmad settled into his new seat and returned to his notes. The cabin crew completed their pre-flight preparations, and the plane began to push back from the gate. Just as the safety demonstration was about to begin, heavy footsteps came from the front of the cabin. Ahmad looked up to see a tall man with steel gray hair and captain stripes on his shoulders, walking purposefully toward him. "Sir," the captain said loudly enough for the entire first-class cabin to hear, "I need to speak with you." Ahmad closed his folder. "Of course, Captain." "Captain Reynolds," the man replied curtly. "I understand there was an issue with seating?" "There was a minor mix-up," Ahmad explained calmly. "Two of us were assigned the same seat, but it's been resolved. I moved to 2C. Captain Reynolds' eyes narrowed. "The flight attendants informed me that you were argumentative about it." Ahmad blinked in surprise. "There must be some misunderstanding. I simply pointed out that we had the same seat assignment, and I was happy to move when asked." Mr. Peterson, still in 2A, leaned forward. "That's right, Captain. There was no argument at all. He was very accommodating." The captain ignored him, focusing intently on Ahmad. "Sir, if you're going to be disruptive, I can't have you on this flight." A cold feeling settled in Ahmad's stomach. He had experienced discrimination before, but never so blatantly. "Captain Reynolds, I assure you I haven't been disruptive in any way. I'm simply trying to get to New York for an important meeting." The captain's jaw tightened. "My crew tells me otherwise, and I trust their judgment. This is my aircraft, and safety is my primary concern." Ahmad took a deep breath, keeping his voice level. "I understand your concerns for safety, Captain, but I've done nothing to warrant them. I'm a lawyer traveling for work. I've complied with all requests and regulations." At the mention of his profession, something flickered in Captain Reynolds' eyes. Not respect, but something closer to disdain. "A lawyer, huh?" The captain's tone grew even colder. "Well, counselor, I'm still going to have to ask you to deplane." By now, the entire first-class cabin was watching the exchange. Ahmad felt heat rising to his face, not from anger, but from the humiliation of being singled out so publicly. "May I ask on what grounds?" Ahmad kept his voice steady, professional. "I'd like to understand the specific behavior you find concerning." Captain Reynolds' face hardened. "I don't need to explain myself to you. My decision is final." From the row behind, a woman had started recording the interaction on her phone. Several other passengers exchanged uncomfortable glances. Ahmad decided to try one more approach. He reached for his wallet and removed his bar association card. "Captain Reynolds, I understand your authority on this aircraft. I'm simply trying to resolve this misunderstanding. I'm a corporate attorney with Wilson and Patel. I'm actually flying to New York to represent an airline in court tomorrow morning." The captain barely glanced at the card. "Security will escort you off if necessary." As if on cue, two security officers appeared at the front of the cabin. The reality of the situation hit Ahmad like a physical blow. This was really happening. He was being removed from a flight he had every right to be on. "I'll go voluntarily," Ahmad said quietly, gathering his belongings. "But I want it noted that I'm complying under protest." As he stood to retrieve his carry-on, he heard murmurs from other passengers. Some looked away uncomfortably. Others watched with open curiosity. Only the couple across the aisle made eye contact, the woman shaking her head slightly in apparent disapproval of the captain's actions. Ahmad walked down the aisle with as much dignity as he could muster, aware of the phone cameras now recording his exit. The security officers flanked him but didn't touch him. Small mercies, he thought bitterly. As he stepped off the plane and back into the terminal, Ahmad felt a strange numbness. In all his years of flying, and he flew frequently for work, nothing like this had ever happened to him. One of the security officers, a younger man with sympathetic eyes, spoke quietly. "Sir, the airline will rebook you on the next available flight." Ahmad nodded absently, his mind already racing through the implications. He would miss his meeting. The case might suffer. And beyond the professional consequences, there was the personal indignity of it all. He pulled out his phone and called his law firm. As it rang, Ahmad watched through the terminal window as Flight 372 pulled away from the gate without him. "Wilson and Patel, how may I direct your call?" came the receptionist's cheerful voice. "Lisa, it's Ahmad Hassan," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. "I need to speak with Robert immediately. There's been an incident. I won't make the New York meeting." As Ahmad explained what had happened, he noticed people in the terminal glancing his way, some recognizing him from the scene that had just unfolded. One woman was showing something on her phone to her companion, both of them looking at Ahmad with undisguised curiosity. The video was already spreading. By tomorrow, it would likely be everywhere. What Captain Reynolds didn't know What he couldn't have known when he made his snap judgment was that Ahmad Hassan wasn't just any lawyer, and the truth, when it came out, would change everything. The video hit social media within the hour. By evening, it had been viewed over 1 million times. Ahmad sat in the airport lounge watching his own humiliation play out on screens across the country. The clip showed him standing calmly as Captain Reynolds towered over him, then walking off the plane with security following. The captions varied from neutral to inflammatory. Man removed from flight after dispute on one news site. Middle Eastern passenger kicked off plane. What did he do? On another. Ahmad's phone hadn't stopped ringing. First his colleagues, then reporters, then friends and family who had recognized him in the footage. He answered only the calls from his law firm. "They've booked me on a flight tomorrow morning," Ahmad told Robert, his managing partner. "But I'll miss today's deposition prep." "Forget the deposition," Robert replied. His normally controlled voice had an edge to it. "This is outrageous, Ahmad. The firm is behind you 100%. Ahmad rubbed his temples. "I appreciate that, but the airline case, we'll handle it. Luis can step in. Right now, we need to address what happened to you." A notification popped up on Ahmad's phone. Another news outlet had picked up the story. This one had a statement from Peninsula Airlines, the carrier whose flight he'd been removed from. Peninsula Airlines is aware of an incident involving a passenger who was asked to deplane Flight 372. The safety of our passengers and crew is our top priority. Captain Reynolds made the decision based on established security protocols. We stand by our crew's professional judgment in these matters. Ahmad's jaw tightened. He read the statement aloud to Robert. Professional judgment? He judged you based on your appearance and nothing else. Robert said, Ahmad, this isn't just about a missed flight. You know that, right? Ahmad did know. In his 20 years as an attorney, he had seen enough discrimination cases to recognize what had happened to him. But experiencing it firsthand so blatantly left him feeling both angry and exhausted. The thing is, Ahmad said quietly, hundreds of people are watching that video and assuming I must have done something wrong. That's how it works. They see security escorting a brown man off a plane and think they wouldn't do that without a reason. Then we need to show them the reason, Robert said firmly. The real reason? After hanging up, Ahmad checked into an airport hotel. He couldn't face the drive back to his empty condo in downtown Chicago, not tonight. He ordered room service and tried to distract himself by preparing notes for the case he would now miss. But his mind kept drifting back to Captain Reynolds' cold eyes. Around 9 o'clock, his phone lit up with a text from Priya, a junior associate at the firm who had become a good friend. Just saw what happened. You okay? Firm's legal team is assembling. Check your email. Ahmad opened his inbox to find a message from the firm's litigation department. They had already drafted a formal complaint against Peninsula Airlines and were preparing media talking points. They needed his detailed account of the incident. As Ahmad typed up his experience, a notification alert showed that Peninsula Airlines had issued an updated statement. Regarding the incident on Flight 372, we have spoken with our crew members and reviewed the situation. The passenger in question was reaccommodated on a flight the following day. Peninsula Airlines does not tolerate discrimination of any kind and takes these matters seriously. We are conducting a thorough review. No apology. No admission. Just corporate speak for we're hoping this blows over. Ahmad finished his statement and sent it to the firm. Exhausted, he finally fell into a restless sleep around midnight. He woke to his phone buzzing with news alerts. Overnight, the story had exploded. Several passengers from the flight had come forward with their own videos and statements. The couple seated across from Ahmad had given an interview stating that he had been completely calm and cooperative. Mr. Peterson, the man with the duplicate seat assignment, had posted on social media that Ahmad had graciously offered to move despite having priority for the seat. Even more damaging for the airline, someone had dug up past complaints against Captain Reynolds. A flight attendant who had worked with him 3 years earlier claimed he had made comments about extra screening for certain passengers. Another, former crew member, alleged that Reynolds frequently made passengers of Middle Eastern or South Asian descent check carry-on bags that others were allowed to bring. Onboard Peninsula Airlines' PR team was in full damage control mode. They issued yet another statement. Peninsula Airlines is deeply concerned by the reports regarding Flight 372. Captain Reynolds has been placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. We have reached out to Mr. Hassan to discuss the situation and express our concerns. Diversity and inclusion are core values at Peninsula, and we are committed to ensuring all passengers are treated with dignity and respect. Too little, too late, Ahmad thought as he prepared for his rescheduled flight. This time he was flying with a competing airline. When he arrived at LaGuardia, a car was waiting to take him directly to his firm's New York office. Inside, he found not just the legal team handling the airline case, but the firm's entire executive committee. We had an emergency meeting this morning, Robert explained, ushering Ahmad into the conference room. The firm has decided to take on your case against Peninsula Airlines. Ahmad looked around the table at his colleagues' determined faces. I appreciate the support, but I'm not sure I want to pursue this. It would mean putting myself in the spotlight, reliving the whole thing. It's bigger than you now, said Grace, the head of the litigation department. She slid a tablet across the table. Look at these. The screen showed dozens of emails and messages from people who had experienced similar treatment on flights. Many were professionals, doctors, professors, business owners, who had been removed from planes or subjected to extra scrutiny for no apparent reason except their ethnicity or religion. Your case has opened the floodgates, Grace continued. People are finally speaking up about something that's been happening for years. Ahmad scrolled through the messages, a knot forming in his throat. One was from a pediatric surgeon who had been removed from a flight while traveling to perform an emergency operation. Another was from a family who had been separated and questioned for hours because of a random security check. There's something else you should know, Robert said. The airline case you were coming here for? We lost the initial motion this morning. Ahmad looked up in surprise. What, how? Without you here to present our arguments, we had to send Louise in cold. The judge wasn't impressed, and she granted the plaintiff's motion for discovery of the airline's internal communications. That's going to expose them to massive liability, Ahmad said, his legal mind immediately assessing the damage. Exactly, Robert nodded. And here's the irony, the airline you were coming to defend? It's a subsidiary of Peninsula's parent company. Ahmad sat back, stunned. You're saying Captain Reynolds kicked the company's own lawyer off the plane? Grace finished for him. A lawyer who was flying to New York specifically to defend them in court. The absurdity of it might have been funny if it wasn't so infuriating. Ahmad shook his head, a bitter laugh escaping him. They're trying to reach you to apologize, Robert added. Their general counsel has called 3 times this morning. I bet they are, Ahmad murmured. His phone buzzed with an incoming call. It was a Peninsula Airlines number, probably their damage control team. Ahmad declined the call. What do you want to do? Grace asked. If you want to file suit, we have the complaint ready. If you want to go public with your story, our PR team can arrange interviews. Or if you want this to go away, we'll respect that too. Ahmad thought about all the people who had reached out with their own stories. He thought about how easily Captain Reynolds had dismissed him, how the airline had initially stood by that decision. He thought about how many others might have faced similar treatment but lacked the resources or platform to fight back. I want to move forward, Ahmad said finally. Not just for me, but for everyone who's been through this. And I don't want money. I want accountability and real change. Grace nodded approvingly. That's what I hoped you'd say. Robert placed a hand on Ahmad's shoulder. Peninsula Airlines doesn't know it yet, but they just picked a fight with the wrong lawyer. As the team began discussing strategy, Ahmad's phone buzzed again, another call from Peninsula. This time the caller ID showed it was from the CEO's office. Ahmad smiled grimly as he declined the call once more. Let them wait. Let them worry. The truth was coming out, and Captain Reynolds was about to learn just how badly he had misjudged the situation and the man he had so casually humiliated. Outside the conference room windows, the New York skyline stretched beneath a clear blue sky. Somewhere out there, Ahmad knew, Captain Reynolds was realizing that his actions had consequences. And this was just the beginning. 3 days after the incident, Ahmad sat in his Chicago office reviewing the evidence his team had gathered. What had begun as a humiliating personal experience had evolved into something much larger. His inbox was flooded with supportive messages and similar stories from people across the country. Peninsula Airlines had moved from damage control to crisis management. Their stock had dropped 7% since the video went viral. The airline CEO, Thomas Whitman, had issued a public statement expressing deep concern and promising a thorough investigation, but the public wasn't buying it. "They're still trying to reach you," said Priya, poking her head into Ahmad's office. Peninsula's legal team called again. "They want to resolve this matter quickly and amicably." Ahmad looked up from his computer. "I bet they do. Also, Good Morning America wants you on tomorrow. And there's a civil rights group online too." Ahmad sighed and rubbed his eyes. He hadn't sought this attention, but he understood its power. "Tell Peninsula I'll speak with them after we've completed our investigation. And yes to the civil rights group, but let's hold off on TV appearances for now." Priya nodded and turned to leave, then paused. "Ahmad, have you seen the new hashtag?" She held up her phone to show him "Jorm Boycott Peninsula" trending nationwide. Later that afternoon, Ahmad met with the firm's investigation team. They had been working around the clock, gathering testimonies and records. "We've found 12 similar incidents involving Captain Reynolds over the past 5 years, explained Lee, a sharp-eyed associate who specialized in research. In 11 cases, the passengers removed were of Middle Eastern, South Asian, or North African descent. Any of them file complaints?" Ahmad asked. 7 did. All were dismissed after internal review. Lee passed him a folder. "We also found something interesting in Peninsula's flight crew manuals. They updated their security protocols 3 years ago to require documented disruptive behavior before removing passengers. Captain Reynolds received this training but has a history of removing passengers without proper documentation." "What about the flight attendants?" Ahmad asked. "The ones who told Reynolds I was being argumentative?" Grace, who had flown in from New York for the meeting, slid another folder across the table. "We've got statements from 4 passengers who were seated nearby. They all confirm you were polite and accommodating. One even overheard Diane, the flight attendant, telling another crew member that people like him always cause problems." Ahmad's jaw tightened. He had suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed still stung. "We also pulled Reynolds' employment records through a contact at the FAA," Grace continued. "He's had 3 formal reprimands for unprofessional conduct and was passed over for promotion twice despite his seniority." "What about the airline's response after the incident?" Ahmad asked. Robert, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. "That's where it gets interesting. We've obtained internal emails showing that Peninsula's initial response, the one supporting Reynolds, was approved despite HR's recommendation to take a more neutral stance pending investigation." "Who approved it?" "James Harding, VP of Operations. He and Reynolds served in the Air Force together 30 years ago." Ahmad leaned back in his chair, processing this information. It was worse than he'd thought. Not just one biased captain, but a system that protected and enabled him. "There's one more thing you should see," Robert said, sliding a final document across the table. "This came in an hour ago from a whistleblower inside Peninsula." Ahmad scanned the paper, an internal memo from 6 months earlier, outlining a passenger profiling system for enhanced security measures. While carefully worded to avoid explicit discrimination, the policy clearly gave crew members broad discretion to flag passengers based on vague criteria of suspicious behavior. "This is," Ahmad began, "systematic discrimination, hidden behind security protocols." Robert finished for him.
"And it came from the executive level." The room fell silent as the implications sank in.
This wasn't just about one bad incident or even one biased captain. It was about an entire corporate culture. "We need to talk to the whistleblower," Ahmad said finally. The meeting took place at a small coffee shop in a Chicago suburb. The whistleblower, a Peninsula Airlines flight attendant named Miguel, looked nervously around the room as he spoke. "I've worked there 12 years, he explained in a low voice. "The culture changed after the new COO came in. Everything became about security and passenger management, but we all knew what it really meant. Did you witness incidents like mine?" Ahmad asked. Miguel nodded. "Too many to count. Most passengers don't fight back. They're too embarrassed or afraid of being labeled troublemakers. They just take it and never fly with us again." "And Captain Reynolds?" Miguel's expression darkened. "He's the worst, but he's protected. He's friends with half the executive team. Younger pilots started following his example because they saw it was rewarded. Those who spoke up were labeled not team players and had their schedules changed to the worst routes." "Why are you helping us?" Grace asked. "You're risking your job. Miguel looked down at his coffee. My parents came to this country as immigrants. I grew up watching how people treated them differently, with suspicion. I promised myself I wouldn't be part of something like that. He looked up at Ahmad. When I saw that video of you, a respected professional being treated that way, something just broke. I couldn't stay silent anymore. Ahmad reached across the table and shook Miguel's hand. Thank you. We'll protect your identity. As they left the coffee shop, Ahmad turned to Grace. We need to expand the scope. This isn't just about me anymore, Grace nodded. Class action? Exactly. And I want to lead it. The news of Ahmad Hassan's class action lawsuit against Peninsula Airlines broke the following week. The case alleged systematic discrimination against passengers based on race, ethnicity, and perceived religion. 27 plaintiffs had already joined, with more coming forward daily. Peninsula's stock dropped another 12%. The company issued a statement, calling the allegations unfounded and promising to vigorously defend our safety procedures, Captain. Reynolds remained on administrative leave but gave an interview to a sympathetic news outlet, portraying himself as a dedicated professional being persecuted for doing his job. He claimed he had removed Ahmad because of concerning behavior that the video didn't show. Unfortunately for Reynolds, 2 more videos emerged the next day, clearly showing Ahmad's calm and cooperative demeanor throughout the incident. The airline's CEO requested an emergency meeting with Ahmad and his team. They gathered in the conference room of Ahmad's firm, with Peninsula's representatives looking notably uncomfortable. CEO Thomas Whitman spoke first. Mr. Hassan, we want to resolve this situation. We're prepared to offer a substantial settlement and a public apology. Ahmad remained impassive. And the other plaintiffs? Whitman shifted in his seat. We're willing to establish a fund for verified claims. And your policies? The profiling system your executives implemented? Whitman glanced at his legal team. We're reviewing all security protocols. Ahmad leaned forward. Mr. Whitman, let me be clear. This isn't about money. This is about dignity and fundamental rights. Your airline has systematically discriminated against passengers based on how they look, and then hidden behind the shield of security concerns. That stops now. What exactly are you asking for? Whitman asked warily. Ahmad slid a document across the table. This is our proposed consent decree. Complete overhaul of your passenger removal policies, mandatory anti-bias training for all staff, an independent review board for security incidents, and yes, compensation for those who have been humiliated and mistreated, not as a payoff but as acknowledgement of the harm done. Whitman scanned the document, his face growing redder by the second. This is outrageous. These demands would cost millions and undermine our security procedures. Your discriminatory procedures have already cost you millions in market value, Ahmad replied evenly, and they'll cost you much more when we present our evidence in court. Is that a threat? It's a fact. We have internal documents, witness testimonies, and statistical evidence showing a clear pattern of discrimination. The only question is whether you want to be the CEO who fought against making things right, or the one who led meaningful change. As the meeting ended without resolution, Ahmad's phone buzzed with a news alert. Another airline had announced a comprehensive review of its own removal policies, citing recent events as the catalyst. It's already having an impact, Robert observed as they watched Peninsula's team leave. Ahmad nodded. But we're just getting started. Later that evening, as Ahmad was preparing to leave the office, his assistant called to tell him someone was waiting to see him. Curious, Ahmad went to the reception area and found an older flight attendant he didn't recognize. Mr. Hassan? My name is Barbara Thompson. I worked with Captain Reynolds for 15 years at Peninsula. She clutched her purse nervously. There's something you should know about the day you were removed from that flight. Ahmad led her to his office, wondering what new piece of the puzzle she might be bringing. Captain Reynolds knew exactly who you were, she said once they were seated. Before he came to remove you, Diane showed him your boarding information on her tablet. Your firm was clearly listed as the contact. He saw you were an attorney. Ahmad felt a chill. You're saying he knew I was a lawyer representing an airline and he removed me anyway? Barbara nodded. He looked at your name and said, and I quote, I don't care if he's a lawyer. People need to learn their place. As Barbara continued her story, Ahmad realized the case was about to take yet another turn. Captain Reynolds hadn't just made a biased mistake. He had made a deliberate choice with full knowledge of who Ahmad was, and that changed everything. Barbara's revelation changed everything. Captain Reynolds hadn't just made a snap judgment based on bias. He had knowingly removed a lawyer traveling on business, aware of Ahmad's profession and purpose. "I need to understand exactly what happened on that flight deck," Ahmad told his team the next morning. "Barbara's testimony suggests deliberate action, not just unconscious bias." Grace nodded. "We should depose Reynolds as soon as possible, before he has time to craft a story." "He'll refuse," Robert said. "His lawyer will claim it's premature." Ahmad thought for a moment. "Then we need leverage, something that makes him want to talk to us." The opportunity came from an unexpected source. A junior flight attendant who had been on the flight contacted Ahmad's office. Unlike Barbara, who had decades of experience, Tyler had been with Peninsula for only 8 months. He was still on probation and risking his career by coming forward. "I was in the cockpit when it happened," Tyler explained nervously when they met. "Captain Reynolds got a call from Diane about a situation in first class. He checked your information on the system. I saw his face change when he read your name and occupation." "What did he say?" Ahmad asked. "He said, Hassan? Middle Eastern lawyer. Just what we need." Then he made a call, not to security but to someone he called Jim. He said, "We have one of those diversity hire lawyers on my flight. Might be the same firm that's suing us." Ahmad and Grace exchanged glances. Jim was almost certainly James Harding, the VP of Operations who had approved the statement supporting Reynolds. "Did Captain Reynolds mention removing me from the flight during this call?" Ahmad asked. Tyler nodded. "He said, I'm going to have him taken off. Can you back me up if there's blowback?" Then he listened for a bit and said, "Don't worry, I'll find a reason." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. This wasn't just discrimination. It was deliberate, coordinated retaliation. "Tyler," Ahmad said carefully, "would you be willing to sign a sworn statement about this conversation?" The young man paled but nodded. "I can't keep working for a company that does this." Armed with Tyler's testimony, Ahmad's team filed an amended complaint, adding charges of intentional retaliation and conspiracy. They also subpoenaed Captain Reynolds' phone records and Peninsula's internal communications. The airline's lawyers fought back hard, filing motions to dismiss, claiming Tyler was a disgruntled employee, and arguing that Ahmad's team was conducting a fishing expedition. But the judge, impressed by the evidence already gathered, allowed the case to proceed and ordered limited discovery. 3 weeks after the incident, Captain Reynolds finally agreed to a deposition. He arrived with 2 attorneys and the stiff defensive posture of a man prepared for battle. Ahmad had decided to conduct the deposition himself, an unusual move, but one he felt was necessary. He wanted to look Reynolds in the eye. The captain's testimony began predictably enough. He claimed he had removed Ahmad due to security concerns based on behavioral indicators reported by his flight crew. He denied any bias or discriminatory intent. Ahmad let him talk, noting how Reynolds avoided eye contact. Then he began his questioning. "Captain Reynolds, prior to approaching me on the aircraft, did you review my passenger information?" Reynolds shifted in his seat. "I glanced at it, yes. Standard procedure. So you were aware I was an attorney?" "I may have noticed that, but it wasn't relevant to my decision." Ahmad nodded, seemingly accepting this answer. "Let's move on. Did you make any phone calls before coming to speak with me?" Reynolds glanced at his lawyers. "I don't recall. Perhaps this will refresh your memory." Ahmad slid a document across the table. Reynolds's phone records obtained through discovery. "At 2:17 p.m., 4 minutes before you approached me, you made a call to James Harding's direct line. The call lasted 2 minutes and 23 seconds. What did you discuss?" Reynolds's face tightened. "I don't remember the specific conversation." "Really? Let me help." Ahmad produced another document, Tyler's sworn statement. "We have testimony from a crew member who was present during this call. According to this witness, you specifically mentioned my name and ethnicity, referred to me as a diversity hire lawyer, when stated your intention to remove me from the flight." Reynolds's lawyer leaned over to whisper something, but the captain brushed him off. His face had flushed red. "That's not what happened," he insisted. "We also have testimony that you asked Mr. Harding for backup if there's blowback and stated, Quote, "Don't worry, I'll find a reason." Is that testimony accurate? Absolutely not, Reynolds snapped. This is ridiculous. You're twisting things. Ahmad maintained his calm demeanor. Captain Reynolds, were you aware at the time that I was traveling to New York to represent an airline subsidiary in court? No, how would I know that? Ahmad slid another document across the table. His original boarding information, which included his firm's name and contact details. Your airline's records show that my firm was clearly listed. A simple search would show that we represent several airlines, including subsidiaries of your parent company. Reynolds said nothing, but a vein pulsed visibly in his temple. One final question, Captain. In your 15 years with Peninsula, how many passengers have you personally removed from flights? Reynolds frowned. I don't keep count. Our investigation shows the number is 43. Of those, 38 were people of color, primarily of Middle Eastern or South Asian descent. How do you explain that disparity? The captain's lawyer cut in. My client won't speculate on statistics that may not be accurate. They're from your airline's own records, Ahmad replied evenly. But fine, we can move on. He looked directly at Reynolds. You know what I find interesting, Captain? In all your public statements, you've never once expressed regret about what happened. Never once considered that you might have been wrong. Because I wasn't wrong, Reynolds shot back. I was doing my job. Your job is to ensure passenger safety, not to profile and remove travelers based on their ethnicity, or to retaliate against lawyers who might sue your company. Reynolds leaned forward, his composure cracking. You people always play the race card. I've been flying planes for 30 years. I've kept thousands of passengers safe. But now I'm supposed to ignore potential threats because someone might call me racist? The room went silent. Reynolds' lawyers looked stricken. Ahmad simply nodded for the court reporter to make sure the statement was recorded. Thank you, Captain, Ahmad said quietly. I think we're done here. The video of Reynolds' deposition, particularly his final outburst, leaked to the media the following day. While Ahmad's team hadn't released it, they didn't mind the publicity. Public opinion, already tilted in Ahmad's favor, shifted even more decisively against Peninsula Airlines. The company's stock dropped another 15%. Travelers began canceling reservations and posting videos of themselves cutting up their Peninsula frequent flyer cards. A social media campaign called Not Your Threat went viral, with thousands sharing stories of being profiled or discriminated against while traveling. Peninsula CEO Thomas Whitman requested another meeting with Ahmad, this time without lawyers present. They met at a quiet restaurant in downtown Chicago. This has gone far enough, Whitman said after they ordered. He looked tired, the strain of the past weeks evident on his face. You've made your point. Reynolds was wrong. We're prepared to settle, whatever reasonable figure you name. Ahmad sipped his water. As I said before, this isn't about money. Then what do you want? Peninsula's losing millions every day. We've already fired Reynolds and accepted Harding's resignation. That's a start, Ahmad acknowledged. But it doesn't address the underlying problems. You had policies in place that enabled discrimination. You created a culture where people like Reynolds were protected and promoted. Whitman ran a hand through his hair. Look, every airline has security protocols. In today's world, don't, Ahmad cut him off. Don't hide behind security. Real security doesn't mean profiling passengers based on their name or skin color. It means actual evidence-based assessment of threats. The CEO fell silent, then sighed. You're right. But changing an entire corporate culture, it's not simple. No, it's not, Ahmad agreed. But it's necessary. What exactly are you proposing? Ahmad had come prepared. He outlined his vision, a complete overhaul of Peninsula's training and security protocols, developed in consultation with civil rights experts. An independent review board for passenger removal incidents, meaningful diversity in hiring at all levels, including executive positions, and yes, appropriate compensation for those who had suffered discrimination. It would be the most comprehensive reform any airline has ever undertaken, Ahmad concluded. Peninsula could go from being a cautionary tale to an industry leader. Whitman considered this. And the lawsuit? We'd be willing to settle if, and only if, these changes are legally binding and subject to independent verification. The CEO nodded slowly. I need to discuss this with the board, but I think we might have a path forward. As they finished their meal, Whitman had one more question. I've been wondering, why were you so determined to pursue this? You could have taken a settlement early on, avoided all this stress and publicity. Ahmad thought about the many people who had contacted him with their own stories. People who had been humiliated, whose dignity had been violated, but who lacked the platform or resources to fight back. Because some things matter more than money or convenience, he said finally. Because what happened to me has happened to countless others who couldn't do what I'm doing now. And because sometimes, the only way to create real change is to refuse to accept injustice, even when it would be easier to walk away. As they parted ways, Ahmad knew the fight wasn't over. The negotiations would be tough. Peninsula might still try to minimize their responsibility or water down the reforms. But for the first time since being escorted off that flight, he felt a sense of cautious optimism. The truth had come out. And it was already changing things, not just at Peninsula but across the industry. Other airlines were quietly reviewing their own policies, aware that they could be the next target of public outrage. Ahmad checked his phone as he left the restaurant. He had a text from Robert. CNN wants to interview you tomorrow. And guess what? Captain Reynolds just announced his retirement. Ahmad smiled to himself. One small victory at a time. 6 months after being escorted off Flight 372, Ahmad stood in a hotel ballroom filled with reporters, civil rights advocates, and airline industry representatives. The settlement with Peninsula Airlines had been finalized the previous day, and now it was time to announce the terms to the public. Ahmad adjusted his tie, feeling a strange mix of triumph and weariness. The past half-year had been a whirlwind of legal battles, media appearances, and countless meetings. His face had become recognizable across the country, the lawyer who stood up to airline discrimination and won. Ready? Grace asked, appearing at his side. Ahmad nodded. As ready as I'll ever be. They made their way to the podium together, joined by Peninsula's new CEO, Vanessa Chen. Thomas Whitman had stepped down to pursue other opportunities 2 months earlier. Corporate speak for being pushed out by a board desperate to salvage the company's reputation. Chen, previously the airline's chief technology officer, had been promoted with a mandate for sweeping reform. Her first act had been to reach out personally to Ahmad and express her commitment to the settlement negotiations. The room quieted as Ahmad stepped up to the microphone. Good morning, he began. 6 months ago, I boarded a Peninsula Airlines flight as a business traveler and was removed for no legitimate reason. What happened to me that day was humiliating and unjust, but as painful as that experience was, it exposed a larger problem, one that affected countless travelers who didn't have the resources or platform to fight back. Ahmad gestured to the diverse group of people seated in the front, or the other plaintiffs in the class action lawsuit, whose stories had been instrumental in building the case. Today, I'm pleased to announce that Peninsula Airlines has agreed to a comprehensive settlement that goes beyond financial compensation. While the company will establish a $49 million fund for those affected by discriminatory removal practices, the heart of this agreement is about fundamental change. He outlined the key points. Mandatory anti-bias training for all staff. A complete overhaul of passenger removal protocols requiring specific, documented behaviors rather than subjective judgments. An independent oversight committee with authority to review incidents and recommend further improvements. A commitment to diversity in hiring and promotion, with transparent metrics and accountability. Perhaps most significantly, Ahmad continued, Peninsula has agreed to share these new practices with the entire industry, potentially transforming how all airlines approach these issues. He stepped back, allowing CEO Chen to take the podium. What happened to Mr. Hassan and others was inexcusable, she said firmly. As the new leadership of Peninsula, we take full responsibility for the culture that allowed such incidents to occur. The changes we're announcing today aren't just about legal compliance. They represent a fundamental shift in how we view our responsibility to all passengers. As the press conference continued, Ahmad found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought him here. He thought about Captain Reynolds, who had retired in disgrace and refused all interview requests. About James Harding, who had eventually admitted to fostering a culture of profiling under the guise of enhanced security. About the many people who had reached out to share similar experiences, grateful that someone was finally listening. After the formal proceedings, a young reporter approached Ahmad. "Some people are calling you a hero," she said. "How does that feel?" Ahmad shook his head. "I'm not a hero. I just had the resources and platform to fight an injustice that many others couldn't. The real heroes are people like Tyler and Barbara, who risked their jobs to tell the truth, and the other plaintiffs who relived painful experiences to help create change." The reporter nodded. "Do you think this settlement will actually make a difference?" "Some critics say it's just a PR move." "I believe it will," Ahmad replied. "Not just because of the specific policies, but because of the message it sends. For too long, companies have calculated that it's cheaper to pay off individual complaints than to fix systemic problems. This case changes that equation." Later that evening, Ahmad's firm hosted a small celebration. As colleagues and fellow plaintiffs mingled, Robert raised a toast. "To Ahmad," he said, "who turned a personal injustice into a catalyst for change." Everyone applauded, but Ahmad felt uncomfortable with the spotlight. He'd never sought fame or recognition. He'd simply wanted accountability and reform. As the party wound down, Ahmad slipped away to a quiet corner and checked his phone. Among the flood of congratulatory messages was an email that caught his attention. It was from Tyler, the young flight attendant whose testimony had been crucial to the case. "I just wanted to thank you," the message read, "not just for standing up to Peninsula, but for showing me that one person really can make a difference. I've been accepted to law school for the fall. Maybe someday I'll be fighting these kinds of battles too." Ahmad smiled as he typed a reply, offering encouragement in his personal email for future advice. Perhaps that was the most meaningful victory of all, inspiring others to stand up for what's right. 1 year to the day after the incident, Ahmad found himself at O'Hare International Airport again, preparing to board a Peninsula flight to New York. He had specifically chosen this airline and route as a personal test of how much had really changed. The terminal looked the same, but much was different. Peninsula had implemented new check-in procedures designed to standardize treatment of all passengers. Their gate agents and flight attendants had completed the first round of anti-bias training. The independent review committee was operational, publishing monthly reports on passenger incidents. As Ahmad approached the gate, he noticed new signage explaining passengers' rights and the specific criteria for removal, all part of the settlement agreement. The gate agent smiled professionally as she scanned his boarding pass. "Good morning, Mr. Hassan. First class, seat 2A. Ahmad felt a flutter of déjà vu as he walked down the jet bridge. He had no legal obligation to fly Peninsula again. The settlement hadn't required it. But he felt it was important to see firsthand whether the changes were meaningful or merely cosmetic. As he stepped aboard, a flight attendant greeted him warmly. "Welcome, Mr. Hassan. May I show you to your seat?" The first-class cabin was nearly full this time. Ahmad stored his carry-on and settled by the window, just as he had a year earlier. The memories of that day were still vivid, but they no longer carried the same sting. "Excuse me," said a voice beside him. A woman with silver-streaked hair extended her hand. "You're Ahmad Hassan, aren't you? I recognized you from the news." Ahmad nodded, prepared for either criticism or praise. He'd received plenty of both over the past year. "My daughter is a flight attendant," the woman continued. "Not with Peninsula, but another airline. She told me they're using your case as a training example now. It's changing things across the industry." "I'm glad to hear that," Ahmad said sincerely. The flight attendants began their pre-departure routine, moving through the cabin with professional efficiency. Ahmad noticed small changes, the standardized greetings, the careful attention to treating all passengers equally. They weren't perfect, but they were noticeably better. As the plane pushed back from the gate, Ahmad found himself thinking about Captain Reynolds. Despite everything, Ahmad didn't hate the man. Rather, he felt a complex mix of emotions: anger at the injustice, satisfaction at the accountability, and something like pity for someone so trapped in his own biases that he couldn't see people as individuals. The real victory wasn't in punishing one captain or even reforming one airline. It was in changing perceptions.